Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I know I'm not at my usual setup. I'm currently on vacation, but you know, it's 2024, so the grind never stops. I'm still gonna make a video, even on vacation. So today's video is the most disturbing radio hijacks. It's actually a sequel to a video I made in 2021 called the most disturbing TV hijacks. So make sure to go watch that after this one. Obviously, I want the watch time. So without further ado, let's head on to our first case. Multiple radio stations hijacked by furries. Oh boy. Let's start with some context. So there's a community out there called the furry fandom. Many of you might have heard of this fandom, but for the 5 innocent people that watch my videos, basically, these are people who find fun in sort of attributing human characteristics to animals. The fancy word for this is anthropomorphism, and an example of that is like Winnie the Pooh, who can speak human words and act like a human. But the furry community isn't as innocent as my Winnie the Pooh example. Why? Well, because it traces its origin to a 1970s comic movement that had animal-focused art with very heavy adult themes and explicit sex. And of course, this fandom is extremely active on the internet, which brings us to the next thing, the Furcast podcast. So think of Furcast as an adult-only online bonfire where furry community members gathered to listen to stories and ask questions. Although it took a pause in 2020, by the time the hijack happened, Furcast was a thriving talk show distributed mainly via its website in the form of a live stream. Now, with all that in mind, what would you do if you were cruising down the highway, listening to your regular tunes, Taylor Swift, maybe some Chainsmokers, maybe some Tuv, and all of a sudden, the radio station starts talking to you about how to have inappropriate interactions with animals.
Part of the experience.
You make it warm. You don't want it warm. You need to make it warm. It's like motivation.
Make the friction, make it warm.
See, exactly. He knows what I'm talking about. Like, if it's already warm, what's the point? The sex makes it better when it's cold because like you have something to look forward to. It's just like this for me. This is like sitting on like a warm toilet seat. You just don't do it. It just doesn't feel right.
Well, this is exactly what happened on April 5th, 2016 to several US radio stations, including the Lift FM in Colorado, KXAX in Texas, and AM in Denver. And unlike the other interruptions in this video, this one was not short at all. It actually went on for 90 minutes. As Jason McClellan, the owner of KXAX, put it, they talked about sex with 2 guys and a girl in explicit details and rambled on with vulgar language. And to make it worse, it was unfortunate that this takeover only stopped after an engineer physically visited the remote transmitter to rectify the problem. But we'll get to that. First though, the apologies. Even Furcast themselves apologized, saying it wasn't their fault, adding, "We are deeply sorry to hear about this inappropriate incident. We are working with law enforcement to investigate this incident. We have preserved all access log files." The radio stations did apologize too for that 9 a.m. PR nightmare moment, with KXAX for instance saying, "We found out that our equipment had been hijacked and was broadcasting a podcast or a stream from an unknown source." So back to the engineer. What exactly happened that they had to go back and fix the transmitter? Well, without boring you with too many technical details, a hacker figured out they could use Shodan, a search engine for internet-connected devices, to find barracks boxes, streaming hardware used by radio stations, that had weak passwords and take them over. They did exactly that, taking over the barracks receivers, locking the stations out, and pointing them to the Furcast livestream. Remember, Furcast did live streams on its website, and so, to the hacker, it was just a matter of copying the livestream's URL into the receiver. Oh, and interestingly, with the barracks box password change, it could only be reset manually. That's why an engineer had to go to the remote transmission tower to do the reset. Also, although the engineers were fixing the issue, when Furcast realized what was happening, they cut off the livestream by moving it to a new URL. Regardless, following the incident, it was pretty clear the hijack was made possible by weak passwords or the station just leaving the default manufacturer passwords during setup. Barracks' own statement said, "Barracks would like to emphasize that its devices are secure for broadcast use when set up correctly and protected with a strong password." Long Island radio station hijacked with racist song. In our previous cases, we've seen a situation where a pirate just overrides a station's signal within a small area, probably because they're using a weak transmitter for the hijack. This next case is pretty interesting because the hacker found out how to hijack the radio signal in its entirety. So let's start with how. Remember the barracks box at the transmission tower? Well, there's some clever engineering on how it works. First, the station at its headquarters beams out a signal to the transmission tower. Second, the barracks box takes the signal and encodes it to a high quality output. This is then amplified by the tower, which throws it much further out, covering a really large area. Broadcast is set up this way because sometimes the location of a studio is not ideal for mounting a transmission tower. Now, between the studio and the transmission tower, what is sent out is referred to as STL, studio to link, and is essentially a high frequency microwave signal. So the pirate in this case figured out they could interrupt the STL and replace the studio's broadcast with their own. So, where and when did this all go down? Well, it took place in Babylon, New York on May 17th, 2006. The pirate hijacked Long Island's WBAB 102.3 signal during a morning show hosted hosted by Roger Luce. Captured in this clip here, you can hear the host talk about the weather, then as a Pink Floyd song, Hey You, was just about to play, there was a sudden interruption, and what played in its place was completely unbelievable and shocked everyone. Instead of Pink Floyd, listeners were rather bizarrely treated to Rebel Johnny's Buddy Hating Me. The actual name of the song is not Buddy Hating Me, that's the N-word. I'm using Buddy as a replacement.
3 remaining finalists. The winner will be picked on May 24th. BAB weather today, mix of sun and clouds with a high of 68. I'm Ted Lindner with Roger and JP on Long Island's #1 rock station, 102.3 WBAB.
Yep, that's right. A racist song calling for the killing of black people, sung by a white supremacist over the airwaves and played uninterrupted to the end. I'm not gonna read the lyrics, but here are a few of them on the screen. It's honestly completely vile, and if you want to find out more about it, I guess, you go look it up yourself. I wonder if it's on Genius. I don't know. Now, once the song played out, there was a period of silence before the station regained its frequency. Well, more like the pirate decided to stop. The end of Pink Floyd's song came back in. As expected, everyone was in disbelief at what just happened. The host, Roger Luce, commented, whatever that was, it was very racist. He also said, I've never seen this in 22 years at this radio station.
102.3 WBAB, Long Island's #1 rock station, plays the most music in the morning. There's John Fogerty, center field. Roger and JP, 721 on BAB. Want to explain to you what just happened on our frequency, 102.3 FM. I've never seen this in 22 years on this radio station, but I have heard about it happening very recently. Someone who wants to broadcast whatever they want to broadcast hacks into our frequency. They find a way to hack into it. I don't know how it's done. I'm not that technical, but they get into our microwave link or something. Our frequencies are public knowledge with the FCC rules. And somehow there's technology that allows people to get in and hack into a radio frequency. So they can do whatever they want and take control, and we sit here and we can turn everything down. It has no effect on it whatsoever because we're just a room distant from our transmitter. So they hack into that, and the broadcast, whatever that was, it was very racist, but whatever it was broadcast, and we have no control. So we called our engineer or whatever, so people are on it right now. But and you heard it, and we came back to Pink Floyd. That is what just happened, and I've heard about it, never heard it happen. That is the weirdest thing I've ever had happen to me in my radio career.
Yeah, let's get ourselves together. Let's do Traffic. We'll give you the $1 Million song.
Yeah.
After Traffic and
yeah, they'll work on the technical stuff, and I'll see if I can get you a better explanation. But in my non-technical mind, that's what I know about it so far. And hopefully it doesn't happen again. That was the oddest thing ever. 723. Here's Traffic with Ted Lindner.
He also went on to try and explain the incident to the audience, saying that they, the host, were powerless in the situation because even if they turned everything down, it would have no effect on what was being transmitted. He also clarified that they were just in a room away from the transmitter, so the pirate could do whatever they wanted on the transmitter's end. When interviewed by Newsday, the station's director John Olson also confirmed that they had been powerless to block the pirate transmission. He was also frustrated that just 2 weeks prior, their sister station, WBLI, had been hijacked with that very same song. Things were so bad, given the media frenzy that ensued, that the station promised a $10,000 reward to whoever could help identify the pirate. Issuing a statement, the station's management also said, "We condemn their actions and their harmful words. They're asking for a full investigation into this matter by the FCC, and we are contacting local authorities to assist us into finding out who did this." Speculation from the NY radio board was that the pirate was an engineer. Apparently, a message on the board read, "Obviously, the STL was hacked by someone who has the knowledge and equipment to override the STL point-to-point link between WBAB's studios and transmitter." Sadly, the pirate was never caught. Masturbation song takes over UK's radio station. So this happened in the UK, where a local station, Mansfield 103.2, got hijacked severely over 3 months, and a masturbation song played over its frequencies. The station, which prides itself in serving non-stop music to its audience, people in North Nottinghamshire and Northeast Derbyshire had to deal with mixed reactions from its listeners while trying to work with the communications regulator in the UK to hunt down the pirate. Now, I know you're wondering what the song sounded like, so we'll start with that. The official title of that song is The Winkers Song, and interestingly, it's a real track that was performed by an artist called Ivor Biggin back in the 1970s. And besides the song's cover art, which some might find absolutely hilarious, the lyrics are unbelievable. The chorus, for example, goes like, and I already know this is gonna get clipped out of context, but It goes, and that's why I'm a wanker, I'm a wanker. He says it a lot, and I'm not gonna say it in the melody, nor am I gonna keep repeating it as many times as this dude did. The song actually repeats the word wanker 36 times. Now, imagine that, at least 8 times a month. The radio station had to apologize to listeners for playing it, and even worse, one of those times was during a live family broadcast from the Party in the Market event that is usually organized by the Mansfield District Council. Now, it had gotten so bad that Tony Delahunty, the station's director, had gotten reports from some people that their children were humming the song in the car. He also added, "We've had calls from people who have found it hilarious, while some have raised their concerns, including our competitors." Also, to add insult to injury, this director admitted that it was frightening how surprisingly easy it was to override a station's frequency, just how difficult it was to stop the pirate doing so. Apparently, Ofcom, the UK's communication regulator, told the station that all one needed to hijack a signal is a small transmitter and proximity to an outside broadcast or the signal they're trying to overpower. Just that. He also added, "There's absolutely nothing we can do about it, and we're trying very hard to do something about it." The station was also certain that whoever was doing it was just a small-time clown, but was concerned about the implications should the idea get into the wrong hands. The director claimed, "This is a clown, but it exposes a situation that is available for, who knows, a terrorist, that type of person, some idiot who wants to put emergency messages on. It could be an awful lot worse. The big problem is you can't catch them." Ofcom's spokesperson, contradicting the station's director regarding the hijacking, clarified that it doesn't happen that often. You need quite a high-powered transmitter. Anyway, the station's theory was that, from what he sounded like, the pirate was between 35 and 45 years old and was probably just showing off to his friends. Regardless, as Tony the director put it, it was an absolute nightmare. US radio station hijacked with political message. So this next one isn't really as disturbing as the others, but it's still worth the mention. So if you remember well, 2020 was the year of the election. And that year's presidential election was truly one of a kind. I mean, there was a lot you could say went wrong. There was the bizarre invasion of the Capitol by Trump supporters, and later what can be called the ever-widening legal predicament facing Trump for election interference. Now, I'm not trying to bore you with political stuff. The point I'm trying to make here is that 2020 was a heavily politicized year, and effectively the effects spilled out in rather strange ways. One such way was the hijacking of a local radio station in Warren, Michigan, 105.5, by an unidentified individual who tried to sway listeners into voting for Trump. As reported by the Telegram online publication, it turns out there was a particular spot on the road towards downtown Warren where the signal was being hijacked. Drivers would first experience a fade or breakup in the genuine signal, then get a bit of static override on the presenters' voices, and then a different voice would come in altogether. This is exactly how the hijack was first detected when it took over the signal, as the station's host went on about sports. So what exactly did this strange pirate voice say? In the video shared by Telegram, you can clearly make out the words, and it says, "Don't be a chump, vote for Trump." Then, almost in a whisper, repeats the same.
Don't be a chump. Vote for Trump. Don't be a chump. Vote for Trump.
Everybody, it is.
And in case you're wondering, the phrase was actually a slogan that was used widely during the Trump campaign in 2020. This signal hijack wasn't a one-time problem. Residents and even the town's police chief admitted that it had been going on for days, just playing over and over. Gerald Millett, the police chief, in a statement to Telegram said, "At first I thought someone was just broadcasting close to the frequency. I drove around and it starts by Pine and Nelson, those are the streets, and it goes all the way downtown. The signal was apparently strongest at an intersection, and it was suspected that the person responsible had placed a transmitter in their attic because their signal's coverage area was relatively small." Anyway, unable to find a solution, the local police forwarded the issue to the FCC. Millett said, "I don't know how to find it, but I am sure the FCC would have a way. It's unclear if the pirate was ever caught, and it's unclear if he kept hijacking even after the election was over." BBC radio hijacked by Nazi Germans. This radio hijack took place in a rather interesting context, World War II. This is during the 1941 period when, if you know your history well, Nazi Germany was very aggressively bombing British cities like London, Coventry, Hull, and Liverpool. I won't go into much detail about that, but I did want to give you guys some context. Generally, Germany was very much on Britain's neck. They were constantly dropping what were called Luftwaffe bombs, forcing Britons to spend endless nights sheltered in underground stations. And obviously this left behind a very damaged economy as the bombs were taking out critical infrastructure. Now, in the middle of all of this, there was a concerning yet comical occurrence on BBC radio. As the Stockman's Journal reported on Wednesday, October 5th, 1941, a mystery voice, apparently of German origin, which interrupted British Broadcasting Company programs with incentives against the government, its leaders, and the United States, promised today to become become a star feature of British radio. So picture this, it's the middle of war, a lot is happening, people are scared, there's destruction everywhere, and the main broadcaster, BBC, is doing its best to keep everyone updated with current information. Then, at random moments, the radio just gets hijacked and it's a voice just dissing the government. And again, not just one interruption. This was a reoccurring thing, so reoccurring that he got a nickname, Harassing Harry. And how was Harry dissing the government? Well, the very first time he said, "Do you know how much money Churchill is being paid by the Germans? Has Churchill played fair with you? We are being swindled, led up the garden path and sold to America." Basically alleging that Winston Churchill, the then British Prime Minister, had been bought out by America. Remember, America was sending military aid to the British because, again, they were being relentlessly hammered by to Germans. Anyway, newspapers reported the case a lot. It was in The Guardian, The Daily Telegraph, and The Stockman's Journal. The voice was taken as very comedic to some civilians. Apparently, these average Brits had already been criticizing the BBC for lack of entertainment value. So when Harassing Harry began coming on, they found it hilarious. Another interesting fact is that because the hacker's signal was so bad, his voice was muffled a lot. It was muffled so much that people began referring to him as Donald Duck. That and Von Donald. I think Von Donald is a lot funnier. On the flip side, the voice was concerning because it meant important news was not getting to the people. As the Daily Telegraph put it, the interruption began a few minutes before the news and disappeared soon after the news had been read. The same newspaper and others also reported that BBC warned Germany that if they wouldn't stop the interruptions, it would actually retaliate. Yeah, BBC said that. The actual statement was, "What you can do, we can do more effectively." In the meantime, the BBC put some measures against Harassing Harry. First, they read the news continuously. They had been previously having short breaks in between news items. Second, they increased the signal power and sped up programs. And lastly, they played back the recording of the first interruption to listeners to help them ignore the interrupter's comments in the future. This was them making it clear that they were not behind those comments. Stockman's Journal also reported that an annoyed BBC announcer even said, "If you were hearing interruptions, particularly during short intervals, you may take it that these are due to direct interruptions from the enemy." The 90-second U.S. radio interruption by German voice. On Friday, November 26, 1943, one news item on the first page of the Herald News read, "The Federal Bureau of Investigation is interested in determining the cause of a 90-second interruption of a network program from radio station WOCO." The news piece, which was also covered by other newspapers like Kenosha News, Bradford Evening Star, and the Bradford Daily Record, was in reference to a rather confusing radio broadcast signal by an unknown person. According to the report, during a show run by Joyce Jordan on the WOCO radio station, there was a sudden cutoff and a German-speaking voice came on. The voice, interestingly referred to as speaking rapid-fire German, mentioned the words Japanese and Paris several times. Now, I would like to provide some context so you know why this was such a big deal. I mean, to the point where the FBI actually got involved. So, it happened in 1943, a time that was right in between the golden age of radio, a period between the 1930s and 1950s when radio was the most dominant electronic medium of entertainment. A survey carried out within that era actually revealed that about 82 out of 100 Americans were consistent radio listeners. And radio had everything. I mean, everything from quiz shows, soap operas, plays, sports, cooking shows, etc. In short, radio was a big deal. And WOCO was among the big stations at the time. So looking at it critically, an interruption by the voice speaking, quote, rapid-fire German would have been noticed by a good number of listeners. That's probably why the FBI was involved, but there could be more by the way of explanation. For instance, if you were keen on our previous case, you might connect the dots and realize that this period was full of tension between Germany, Britain, and the US. Given that the BBC had experienced repeated radio signal interruptions by the Nazi Germans in 1941, just 2 years earlier, you would definitely thus not be surprised that the FBI was interested in the WOCO station case. The Joyce Jordan program at WOCO station is also being aired on the Columbia Broadcasting System network of about 115 radio stations. There were concerns of all these other stations being affected, but it turned out that WOCO was the only one in trouble. Anyway, the interruption, which lasted about 90 seconds, was taken as a possible enemy intrusion via a shortwave broadcast. However, the FBI agent in the case, J.B. Wilcox, confirmed that this, quote, enemy theory had no direct allegation. Instead, a more solid reason was determined to be cross telephone wires. It was also a one-time thing, and right after the interruption, the program continued to air as normal. Swedish radio hijacked with propaganda song. This next signal hijacking case takes us to the beautiful city of Malmö, Australia. In a rather bizarre occurrence, on November 11th, 2017, listeners to one of the local favorite stations, Mix Megapol, was treated to unwelcome propaganda for about 30 minutes. And not just regular propaganda, no. This had its origin from the Islamic State, the one also known as ISIS. Now, just to emphasize how weird this was, Mix Megapol, the radio station in question, was commercial. It wasn't government affiliated at all, and just targeted to regular 25 to 40-year-old Australians with, quote, the best mix of hits and oldies. In fact, the hijack happened in the middle of a very chill morning show, Anders and Gry with friends, and was only noticed by the hosts once their listeners called in trying to find out what was happening. The 3-minute song, which Islamists Watch called a, quote, ISIS recruitment song, played over and over for about 30 minutes. Part of the lyrics were, for the sake of Allah, we will march to gates of the paradise where our maidens await. We are men who love death just as you love your life. We are soldiers who fight in the day and the night. Now, as to exactly what happened, Jacob Gravestam, one of the station's directors, said, somebody interfered with our frequency using a pirate transmitter. In short, someone just took over their transmitter and decided to troll using the ISIS recruitment song. This was of course worrying because the station, which broadcast its signal from Stockholm, had an estimated 1.4 million listeners at the time. However, it was a relief that the hijack only affected listeners in Malmo, a city in the southern part of Australia. He also said they reported the incident to the police and the Australian National Post and Telecom Agency. He added, a lot of people have called us about this. We are very happy that people are vigilant and we treat this very seriously. Multiple US radio stations hijacked with Donald Trump. Okay, so going back to the furry fandom hijack, I explained that the hacker used Shodan, a search engine for internet-connected devices, in order to hijack the station, to find barracks boxes that had weak passwords and hijack the whole radio station. Well, this time, the same method was used, only to hijack a different radio station, Sunny 107.9, in Salem, South Carolina. This happened back in 2016 on November 7th. It was during a Monday night broadcast where instead of the usual classic hits and beach music, the station began playing FDT, Fuck Donald Trump, an anti-Trump song. FDT was done by rapper YG, and it was part of his 2016 album titled Still Brazy. It featured Nipsey Hussle, rest in peace, and was just as popular as it was controversial. In fact, if you look at some of the comments under the song on YouTube, you'll see what kind of effect it had on the masses. For example, one guy said, I have the hook cut and looped so I can play it when I drive through MAGA areas. I've had the cops called on me 5 times, but I don't give a can't stop, won't stop. And this effect is not for nothing. Once you hear the lyrics, you understand why. I counted a total of 32 times where the song says Donald Trump. So yeah, imagine that playing on loop on a Monday night randomly. Now, following the hijack, Sunny 107.9 took to their Facebook page to update their audience on what was going on. A message from Frank Patterson, the station's president, stated, our internet has been hacked at our transmitter site, and the station has played anti-Trump song. This is not our broadcast. We at WFBS do not take political views. He also added, we have captured the IP address that will be forwarded to the government authorities and the FCC for prosecution. It's also very evident they were trying not to offend anyone and make it super clear that they have no political opinions. Patterson added, again, we hold our political views to ourselves, and these statements and or songs made on the air are not that of 107.9 FM. Now, another surprising thing, or maybe unsurprising, is that this is just one of many other stations that had been hijacked and listeners forced to endure the FDT track on loop. BuzzFeed, for instance, reported that the same had happened to a low-power station in San Angelo, Texas. Other affected stations included 103.5 in Evansville, Indiana, 96.7 in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, 101.9 in Seattle, and 100.9 in Louisville, Kentucky. Again, the blame was directed at how radio stations use barracks devices without adding extra layers of security. As Newsweek put it, owning such a device and not assigning a secure password or using a firewall is kind of like parking a bulldozer in the middle of Times Square with the keys in the ignition. Some bored teen is gonna take it for a joyride. Mysterious Russian radio station hijacked with memes. Our last case also deserves a bit of historical context in order to make sense easily. Now, back in the 1970s and 80s, there were a lot of broadcast signal hijacks in the Soviet Union. This was primarily due to a high demand for non-government affiliated broadcasting. As the broadcast market grew, pirates wanted to share. Actually, imagine it as a situation where a few guys get genuine licenses to broadcast, then many others just override these genuine signals with whatever they thought the audience wanted. In fact, according to UCR, a newspaper at the time, they called these pirates hooligans broadcasting drivel, rudeness, vulgarity, uncensored expressions, and trashy music. Unfortunately, this habit of intruding on radio stations did not fade away with the end of the Soviet Union. As recently as 2002, it happened to a Russian radio station whose roots trace back to the Soviet time. And in case you didn't know, 2022 was the year that Russia invaded Ukraine. As the two countries were at it, UVB-76, a shortwave radio station dating back to the Soviet era, was spammed by signal pirates. Now, just so you know, UVB-76 is not your ordinary radio station. In fact, it's on the opposite end of ordinary. It's just super creepy. Why? Well, the speculation is that it's used as a communication tool by Russian intelligence, and this speculation is based on actual events. As reported by Wired, for instance, somewhere in the 2010 period, it relayed what was considered Morse code. Before that, at different points, it did beeps, buzzes, codes, and numbers. In 2011, it even sounded like someone was in the broadcasting room. A male voice heard saying Mikhail, Dmitry, Zenya, Boris, indicating that the station had changed its name to MDZB. According to Wired, UVB-76 would read out out mysterious numbers like 04979 DRENDOUT and call out letters such as TRENERSKIY. It turns out that once Andres Aslade, a techpreneur, made UVB76 stream available online, UVB-76.net, which is not active now. Hundreds of thousands were listening in from the US, Russia, Britain, Brazil, Japan, Croatia, and everywhere else. So in short, it was a weird, mysterious station with a huge audience. Anyway, back to the hijacking. In January 2022, some users started seeing signs of signal override on the station. This Twitter user, for instance, captured this troll face on the frequency. This other user recorded a clip of Psy's Gangnam Style playing over the frequency. It also turns out that this station had been hijacked several other times, including one time when the listeners were rickrolled. Despite the hijacks, the station continues to broadcast its mysterious messages. Alright guys, that was it for this video. Make sure to leave a like, make sure to subscribe if you want to. I'm not forcing you. You can always unsubscribe, and it's free. Whatever Dream says in the beginning of all his videos, y'all know y'all can unsubscribe in case anything goes wrong here in Tuvland. But like I said, the grind is not stopping in 2024. I have a new single out. It's called Hachiko. Make sure to go stream that. It's doing very good. If you want to hear my beautiful voice sing, make sure to go check me out on Spotify, Apple Music, SoundCloud, YouTube, on my second channel where I have a podcast as well. That's basically it. I'll see you guys next time I upload.